Okay, today's an exciting day. We get to do some factoring. Factoring is equal to fun. So, I'll show you how to do this. It's basically the opposite of distributive property. If you remember the last worksheet we had a long time ago before NWEA, we were taking two terms and multiplying them together here, right? Doing this where you'd have x squared and then x times negative 4 would be negative 4x and plus 3x, and then you just combine those and you get x squared minus 1x or minus x minus 12, just like that. Factoring is just basically the reverse of this, and we use factoring to solve equations that have an x squared term and an x term in the same equation. You can't solve that equation by adding 8 to this side, because if you do that you'll have x squared plus 2x equals 8, and then you can't square root it because you have this 2x here, and if you move the 2x over, it just never works. It's not like if you have in parentheses. That's different. There's just an x and you have a group of two things here that's squared. That's where you'd move the 8 over and then square root it. But this isn't that. To solve this we have to factor it. And some of you may have factored before. I have no idea where you're all at as far as your factoring. But basically we're going to start with something like this that has three terms, x squared, an x, and then another number. And we're going to work backwards, and we're going to come up with an answer that has two binomials just like this. Those are called binomials. There's two pieces to it. So I'm just going to show you the guess and check way today. Put down a couple sets of parentheses. Notice I'm going to refer to this one a lot while doing this one, because that's how I think it's easier to see that way. Notice our first term here is x squared, and we got that by multiplying the front term here with the front term here, so it's just x times x gives you x squared. So when you're going backwards you think, what multiplies to give me x squared? Well, it's just x and x. Next step when you do this, think about the back number next, because the middle one's weird. The back one though, the back number is always just this number multiplied by this number. So positive 3 times negative 4, and you get negative 12, and that stays the back number in my polynomial there. The middle comes from, we have to do x times negative 4 and then add to that 3 times x, so we'll do that one last. So the back number, we go, okay, what times what gives me negative 8? Because I know I'm just going to multiply those and get negative 8, and that's where that one comes from. Oops. There's a few different options, so I'm not going to write them in yet. I could have 2 times 4 or 1 times 8. And I'll worry about signs later. One's going to be positive and one's going to be negative, but we'll figure that out in a second. So I know I'm either going to have 2 and 4, 1 and 8. Now you just go, okay, for the middle one. Notice on the middle one, if it's just x times negative 4, you have negative 4x, 3 times x, 3x. So really, you have negative 4 plus 3, and that's how you got your negative 1. So if I add those together, I get my middle term. So same thing here, I'm going to multiply to negative 8, but which of these two can I add together to get positive 2? Well, I can't do 8 and 1 in any combination. And when I say add, I don't necessarily mean, I shouldn't say add. You could add or subtract, right? But subtraction is just addition of a negative number. So like here, if I have an 8 and a 1, can I combine those to get 2? Well, no. 8 minus 1 is 7. 8 plus 1 is 9. I can't add or subtract them to get 2, so it's not going to be those. But I can do 4 and 2 and get positive 2. And if I'm going to do that, the 4 needs to be positive and the 2 needs to be negative. Positive 4 minus 2 is 2, and positive 4 times negative 2 is negative 8. There's my answer. Just to make sure, I'm going to check it. X times x is x squared. X times 4 plus 4x minus 2x, negative 8, and if I combine my like terms, I get that. So this x minus 2 times x plus 4 is the factored form of this. This times this gives me this. All I did was break it apart into those two things. That's factoring. That's it. It's really easy when the coefficient of this term is 1, meaning when the number in front of the x squared is 1, this is really easy. All you have to do is figure out what multiplies to the back number and adds to the middle number, and that's what you're going to put in there. To finish solving this equation, you just think, if this represents a number, this represents a number. If I multiply two numbers together and my answer is 0, one of those two numbers has to be 0. Either one of them. If this is 0 times, if I plug in, well, you'll see later. If I plug in 2 for x, this would be 0, this would be 6, I get 0. Right? So you have to figure out, what numbers can I plug in for x to make either one of these 0? Well, the easiest way to do that is you just take each one of those and set them equal to 0. A lot of you will skip this step in the future because it'll be really easy to see. X will equal 2, and x could equal negative 4. So if I plug that into there, this will be 0 and it'll work. If I plug that in, it'll be 0 and it'll work. So to solve these, factor it, and then set each one equal to 0 and solve for x. One more quick example. All of your ones on your worksheet today are just going to be basic, simple ones like this. Well, I'm going to put a 2 in front next, but for now, you'll see. It's just x squared. That means it's easy factoring. What two number? I know it's going to be x times x. What two numbers multiply to give me negative 5 and add to give me negative 4? Well, always do the multiply first. To get 5, my only options are 1 and 5. So now I just have to think, how could I make one negative, one positive to get negative 4? Well, it should be easy. Negative 5 plus 1 is negative 4. So I'm going to have plus 1, negative 5. You can check it if you want by doing distributive property to make sure you get that same thing. Then just take each one of those, set it equal to 0, and solve for x. So x equals negative 1, and x equals 5. The first 6 problems on your worksheet today are just like this. The last 3, the number in front of the x squared isn't 1. So what I want you to do now, though, pause this video and take the next, 20 minutes to 30 minutes to work on those first 6, get them factored, then come back and watch this next part of the video. So pause it now, because I'm about to start 2x squareds. So 2x squareds, if you get something like this, 2x squared minus 5x. You're still going to factor to solve that. You have to. You still have an x squared and an x. But now it's just an extra step. It's just a little extra thinking. The front 2 here, those are still going to multiply, but you have to get 2x squared now. Well, that's still easy. The only thing that multiplies to give me 2x squared is 2x times x. Now we have to multiply, again, the back 2 numbers to get this here. That doesn't change. So how can I get 3? Well, the only way I can do that are 1 times 3. This is where it gets different. And this is where I always use a pencil and I say, alright, I know I'm going to multiply a 1 and a 3, but now it's not just add those together and get 5. That doesn't work. You got to think about, where does this 5 come from? So I always plug them in here and then try it and see if my answer worked. So I'm just going to guess, maybe it's 3 here and 1 here. So if now I go, okay, 2x times x is 2x squared. 2x times 1 is 2x. I'm multiplying it back out now to see if I will get 5 right here in the middle. 3 times x is 3x, and 3 times 1 is 3. Is there a way that I can combine those to get negative 5x? Well, the answer here is yes, if these are both negative. Well, if both my negative 2x and my 3x right here, if those are both going to be negative, doesn't that mean these both have to be negative? Right? Because 2x times negative 1 will give me negative 2x, negative 3 times x will give me negative 3x, and then that'll give me negative 5x in the middle. There's a problem. Now if I do negative 3 times negative 1, that's positive 3. That didn't give me my negative 3. When you get something like that, it doesn't work, you got to switch those numbers now. So when you get really fast at this, you can do it in your head. I'll show you how to do it in your head tomorrow. Those of you that are good with numbers. So here, still I know it's 1 and a 3. Now let's switch it though. I'm going to put 1 here and 3 here. So again, I'll have 2x squared, 6x, 1x, and 3. How do I make negative 5 out of a 6 and a 1? Well, don't I need negative 6 plus 1? So then 6 has to be negative, so 2 times negative 3 will give me negative 6, and positive 1 times x. And then 1 times negative 3, there, now it works. Negative 6 and 1 is negative 5, and I got my negative 3 that I wanted. So there's my factored form. Of that. Last step's the same. Just set each one of these equal to 0. And solve each one for x. So here I'll subtract 1. So 2x equals negative 1, divide by 2. I know I'm writing small now, but the paper's moving. So x equals 1/2, or negative 1/2, there's one answer. Add 3. X equals 3 is the other. So this is just a little more tricky. You just kind of guess and check it. Show you one more real quick. 2x squared plus 5x plus 2 equals 0. Again, just a 2x squared. So I know it's going to be 2x and x. The only thing that multiplies to 2 are 1 and 2. So I'll just plug them in. 1, 2. Looks like everything's positive, so I better have both positives. See if this works. If this doesn't work, I'm just going to switch my 1 and 2. We'd have 2x squared plus 4x plus 1x plus 2. 4 plus 1 is 5. Hey, yeah, it works. So 2x plus 1. There's my factored form. Set each one equal to 0. You'll get negative 1/2 and negative 2. So there's that. So now go ahead and finish those last 3. See you tomorrow.